Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the March 18th, 19th, March 19th,
18th.
Envision Eugene Technical Advisory Committee meeting. My name is John Borofsky. I'm the chair. We'll go around and do some introductions and then we'll get into our agenda. So I'm just going to read off left to right, and we're going to not just do it. We'll start with Elena.
All right, Elena, assistant planner with the City of Eugene staff.
And then Heather.
Heather O'Donnell, also City of Eugene staff.
Howard.
I'm a member of the Sustainability Commission and LRAPA.
Tiffany.
Tiffany Edwards. I am on the Eugene Planning Commission. I also represent the Eugene business community through the Eugene Chambers Local Government Affairs Council.
All right, Phil.
Bill Farrington. I work for CDC Management Corp. And my Texas Longhorns are picked to go to the Final Four by me.
Great. Kevin.
Kevin Shanley, retired urban planner.
Ed.
Ed McMahon, Home Builders Association.
Thea.
Thea Evans, City of Eugene staff.
Sue.
Sue Pritchard, person.
Are you sure now?
Yeah. And person from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
There we go. We have the majority vote here. We will go with Alex.
Hey, also Sue, you're amazing person, not just person. Alexis Biddle, representing 1,000 Friends of Oregon. I also sit on the board of Housing Land Advocates and Better Eugene Springfield Transportation.
Great. Michelle?
I'm Michelle Hunt. I work for Lane County Parks, and I lived in Traverse City, Michigan for 3 years.
Beautiful area.
Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Rebecca?
Rebecca Gershow, non-retired urban planner, City of Eugene.
Excellent. All right. So our first item of business is to do the Zoom meeting protocols. Do we need to do that, Heather?
I don't think so. I think people are familiar. Just try and stay muted while you're not talking so we don't hear your background noise, and I'll rely on you, John, to call on folks as they raise their hand. Jump in if I have to.
Perfect. Thank you. Next, we have agenda review. Does anybody have any issues with the agenda as presented to you in your packet? All right, we'll move on from that with consent. The next is the approval of the Zoom meeting summaries. There was a link to that in our thing. If anybody had a chance to look at that, if there's any changes or edits that you would like to make at this time.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, second.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? All right, great.
Can we pick a second on that one since 3 people raised their hand?
Kevin was the second that I
Okay,
saw first.
Thank you.
Public comment. Do we have anybody in the lobby that would like to speak? If so, you can raise your hand.
The only attendee we have on is another staff member who's watching tonight.
Well, they can talk if they want, but they have to raise their hand.
Okay, her hand is not raised.
Okay, then we're moving right along here. So now the next thing is we're going to go to election of officers. I'm going to let Heather lead this discussion.
Sure, thank you. So the bylaws say that we will elect chairs and co-chairs annually. Of course, we have to have a meeting for that to occur. And as you know, we've had sometimes where we haven't had meetings. So I think we're a little bit behind on that. But there are a couple of things that I want to be sure that we cover. I'd like to get nominations, self-nominations, volunteers for being chair and being vice chair. And the way that it worked last time is that whoever was chair and vice chair, that went on for a year, and then they switched roles. And so if you all think that that worked well, it seemed to work well, we can do that again. And then we'll talk about the next item after that, which is just talking about length of terms and lining up those with our boards and commissions lengths of term. So who all would like to volunteer to be chair or co-chair? I mean, anyone can. I think that all would be amazing.
Sue, you chaired this thing for quite a while, back when it was a different iteration. Did a great job.
Heather, why don't you explain, or John and I can explain exactly what's involved, because it's not that big of a job, really.
Yeah, why don't, I would love to
Not
hear.
that bad. Is that what you're saying?
It's not that big of a job.
Yeah, well, I would love to hear you two put it in your words. That would be great.
Well, I'll go. I mean, the main thing is just working with our staff to look over the draft agenda and agree to that. And then the other piece of it has been, primary piece is just managing the meeting. And just trying to keep track of who is in queue to ask questions. The other thing that John and I think, did formally was we sat in on one of the Zoom meetings, a joint session of the Lane County Board of Commissioners and the City Council on the urban growth, or the urban reserve update package. So that's really been about it. So, I think the hardest part is, running a meeting, and I think between staff and, having a chair and co-chair, you can kind of manage that. So I don't think it's that big of a job. It's certainly not as big of a job as like being on a planning commission or sustainability commission or something like that.
Yeah, I would just second that. I would say that, now that we're pretty much wrapping up urban reserves, it's going to be basically the monitoring committee and at some point, I'm sure that Heather will be presenting to City Council, and at that point, it might behoove us, whoever the chair or co-chair is, to maybe attend that meeting and give the views of this committee, but that's pretty easy. So that's it with that. I see Phil's hand up.
Is there a reason in the bylaws or personally that Howard, you and John would not want to continue?
Well, for me, in June, my second 4-year term on the Sustainability Commission will end. And so I will term out. And so I guess it's up, I've indicated I'd like to continue on EETAC, but that's up to the city manager. So I don't know, if I'll be continuing or not, but John and I have done it, since EETAC's inception. And so I think it'd be good to have someone else fulfill that role. I mean, most commissions, usually 1 or 2 years is all that one person serves in a chair, co-chair, or vice chair position. So, we've been doing it close to 1.5 years, 2 years now. So I think, can't speak for John, but, I think I'm ready to pass the baton to someone.
Yeah, I would probably second that as well. And I will be coming off of Planning Commission too, and I'm not sure what I'm tied to, if I'm an at-large or if I'm a Planning Commission representative, but I know Commissioner Edwards is on the Planning Commission, so we could maybe swap duties and continue on. But yeah, so time for new blood.
I have a question, because I do know that, and I was reading that there are two of our members that were on 2-year, was it Lisa and Howard, that were on 2-year terms that needed to be re-upped?
No,
that right?
mine was tied to Sustainability Commission
Okay.
membership, so I didn't have a yearly term per se.
Okay, that was my question. I'm also, I know everyone, no, not, it doesn't look like a really popular job, but I'm up for it. So if I did chair planning commission, so I feel like if Howard and John are saying that it's not that hard, I think I could probably handle it. But I would be happy to serve as the chair for this group, and hopefully someone would like to be my other co-chair. So
Sue, your hand is up.
Yeah. Well, I love it that you volunteered, Tiffany. That's fabulous. But also, I was going to say that for anybody who does volunteer, I think there are several other of us who would be willing to go appear at meetings, city council meetings, county commissioner meetings. So even if we're not chairs or co-chairs, I mean, I'm always happy to do that. So I think you have to think about your job as a co-chair as not having to do everything, because you don't have to do everything. I mean, I think several of us would be willing to appear in those other meetings. So think about it that way.
Heather.
Thanks for that, both of you. Yeah, that's another way to look at it. Like you said, Tiffany, that you've done other chair duties before. If there's someone that is feeling uncomfortable, then being a co-chair is a good opportunity to just kind of feel it out. You would be chair if the chair couldn't make a meeting, so you wouldn't be on all the time, but you would be the backup, and so it allows you to kind of put your toes in the water, so to speak. So think about that as an option. Was the other thing? Oh, the other thing I think that we've been trying to work on, that I think John, by having us go around and introduce ourselves in the beginning, is making sure that people's voices are in the room. This is pretty technical stuff, and I think we can be bringing a lot, we can be kind of fire hosing you with information. So one of the things the chair and the co-chair can help each other do is make sure that we get everybody's voices in the room. So that is a role that I think is really important for the two positions. So does
All right, we have one, we need one more.
I'd like to make sure, yeah, does anyone else want to volunteer? Yeah.
Phil?
I'm not volunteering, but I'm thinking, since we had two guys before, Tiffany stepped up. So Michelle, Lisa, if you guys or Sue would want to volunteer, I think we'd be in great shape. Please.
Hello. I'm only reluctant because of my very busy actual work, but I'd be happy to co-chair.
yes.
Okay. So we have.
Good job.
So I've got.
Dream team.
I see, Sue, do you have your hand up, or?
Yeah, no, I had my hand up to say there's no way I'm going to do it. And so I'm thrilled that Michelle is stepping up. And also, I just wanted to remind us that we have a couple of other people who aren't here, but I think having Michelle and Tiffany do it would be just fantastic. So I'm totally supportive of that. I think it's a great idea.
I think we know why they're not here, maybe.
Probably.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we appoint Tiffany Edwards and Michelle Hunt as chair, co-chair for the next fiscal year, I guess.
Second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Howard, for being co-chair with me.
Thank you, John.
We got this thing going. We looks like we landed urban reserves pretty close to it, and now we can move on to the numbers. So at this point, I am going to pass it off to our new chair and sit back and participate a little bit in the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John. Wow, I wasn't expecting to run the meeting today. So good thing I've got the agenda up, huh? Where are we? Let's see, we did our welcome.
So I have a couple more things on this item, if that's all right.
Okay.
Well, first, I just also wanted to say thanks to John and Howard. We really appreciate it. Sue, I'm pretty sure Sue is saying she would not do it because she did however many years of the TRG co-chair. So she's put in her time. It has nothing to do with the role, you know, the requirements of the role, I'm sure, right, Sue? Just nod.
Yeah. Thanks, Heather.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you all very much. And thank you, Tiffany and Michelle, for volunteering. We will, you know, loop you in. We send you both the agendas for review ahead of time. And if there's any process questions, we confer with both of you. So we'll do that moving forward. So the motion was to have Tiffany and Michelle be chair and co-chair till the next fiscal year. And so just for clarity, we're talking about going to basically through June of next year. And that is in order to deal with that note I put in the agenda about boards and commissions, their terms end at the end of the fiscal year, and then they usually do elections right after that. So that will line us up with the issue that we're dealing with right now, which is that both John and Howard will be transitioning off of their boards. And so at the end of this fiscal year, and we will need a sustainability replacement, which will put us at 14 people if Howard and John both are able to stay on, and that works for everyone. And if Tiffany, which I think we had kind of lined up for Tiffany to start wearing the Planning Commission representative hat. So that leaves one extra space with our range of 12 to 15 members. I did reach out to Brittany Quick-Warner from the chamber because we had said we would circle back with them once Tiffany transitioned into the LTD job. We have a lot of musical hats going on. But so there may still be interest down the road, but I did just kind of let her know where we were at with numbers. John, I think you had agreed to be to coordinate with the chamber to make sure that they have someone that is their key connection on the EETAC, but Brittany may be circling back with you. But I just kind of wanted to flag that for the group. So it does sound like both Howard and John, you both want to stay on after your terms are up in June. Is that correct? Okay. Okay. So other thing I wanted to talk about really quickly is a very similar issue. If you look at the bylaws, we talked a lot about how the first group of EETAC members would be on these, not alternating, but staggered year cycles. Mm-hmm. And we then said with the next group that their terms would that they would start and end at the end of the fiscal year, just like we're talking about doing right now with the chairs and commissions. So I would like to propose that that's what we do with this first group as well. We started in October and we're going to run into the same issue again if we don't not only make the chair and the co-chair end at the end of the fiscal year, but we also make everybody's terms end at the end of the fiscal year. So rather than saying you have a 4-year term from October to October for 4 years, it would be 4 years plus till the end of June. So it's just, it is adding some more time. I feel more comfortable adding more time than shortening people's terms because this work is pretty complicated. We really did want to have people stay on as long as they could. Obviously, you can still leave at any time, so you're not locked in, but just from an administrative standpoint, I think it makes a lot more sense to have this group end in at the end of their term, each of your terms being the end of the fiscal year. So I don't think we need to amend the bylaws to do that, since we had already said that was what was going to happen with the next group after you. We already kind of set it up. We just didn't really think about it with this group. So if everyone is comfortable with that, and I see Sue has her hand raised, I'd love to hear your feedback if that works for everyone.
Yeah, I was going to call on Sue, but do we need to vote on, Howard and John staying on, or do we? I didn't know if that needed a vote by the group.
We did not do that last time when you stayed on because we had room and we actually had that in the bylaws to allow for people to stay on for longer, just because everybody has invested so much knowledge in this that it's really helpful for you to stay on, actually.
Sue, go ahead.
Yeah, I really support that concept and that plan, Heather. I think it's a good one. I think continuity in this project is really, really important. It's hard enough to have a new president every 4 years, but to have new people coming in, there is so much sort of history of what has led to this point that, we don't want to be stale and don't want to get stuck in any kind of philosophy or position. So that's important too. But I think continuity is really critical.
Okay, John? You're muted.
Yeah, that's why I think we wrote in the extra members, just for the situation that Howard and myself are in. We knew that positions that were tied to boards and committees would term out, and we didn't want to lose the legislative history and knowledge that goes along with that. So that's why we're going from 12 to 14 or 13 to 14, and then bringing in a few new people if possible. But that's what, when we were writing the bylaws, we specifically did that so that we can stay and give our input after our terms on our committees end.
Okay. And so does this presumably mean, Heather, that we would, I know you were talking to Brittany, when I left the chamber, we had conversations about the fact that both John and I are still part of the, LGAC and still really connected with the chamber. So I wasn't sure, but does this theoretically mean that we could have a new member joining this group?
We kind of kicked that ball down the road because she, because the position, the government liaison position that you were in, hadn't been filled yet. We do have room for another position. And so, another member. And so I think, it would be a bit of a challenge, like Sue was talking about, for somebody to come in the middle right now. And so since we're not butting up against the 15 max yet. We would actually have one slot, you know, depending on what the conversations with the chamber are. If John wants to continue, and Tiffany, you're on LGAC too, and the chamber is fine with that representation. They also know that the meetings are live. They can tune in. I sent them the information for that. So there might be a better point at which to have a new member come in that isn't right at this moment.
Okay, well, is there any other discussion on that topic?
Yeah, I've just got one more thing, and this goes to you, Howard. With your remaining few months on Sustainability Commission, if you could try and figure out who would be a good fit from that commission to take your seat, and maybe groom and try and get somebody that you think would fit well with this committee, that would really be appreciated.
Yeah, I'll try to do that. I've given periodic updates on what we've been up to. I must admit, from my perspective, there hasn't been a lot of interest on the commission on this. They've been mainly focused on, climate recovery ordinance and those kind of things, waste and fossil fuels, which is understandable. But I will get with the outgoing chair. All 4 at-large positions on the Sustainability Commission are expiring, and I know at least 2 of us are terming off. So, but anyway, I will talk that up and see, what the interest is, and hopefully we can identify someone that has some passion about the topic.
And if you need staff to attend a meeting to give an overview or show some materials, let us know.
Okay, will do.
Okay, well, it looks like maybe we can move on to item number 3. Rebecca, Urban Reserves Adoption Preparation Update. I think we're ready.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
At our last meeting, someone asked for an update on the process. And so I put together a couple of slides just to detail out the pieces of the puzzle and what we're working on. And so I'm going to share that with you guys. Okay, can everybody see that?
No.
You can't?
No, you aren't sharing quite yet.
I'm not?
No.
I'm glad I asked. I'm not sharing. Why aren't you sharing? I know how to do this by now. Okay, now I'm gonna share.
There we go.
There we go.
Now we can see.
You'd think I'd have this down by now. Okay. So we are, as everybody knows, we're putting together the adoption package. Back in November, we got direction from our decision makers on the proposed urban reserves. And so that was fabulous. That was wonderful. That was an amazing milestone. We know what we're aiming for, and then we had the crashing reality of, oh, well, that's only one milestone. Now we get to move into putting together this giant adoption package. So mostly what we have come to you regarding urban reserves with is number 3, these appendices. So the adoption package that is ultimately going to get adopted jointly by, or not necessarily jointly, by City Council and the Board of Commissioners is composed of basically these 5 elements. So the ordinances from the county and the city both establish urban reserves, the findings. Some of you know this by heart, others of you may not know this. So I'm just going to walk through maybe a middle ground here. The findings provide the rationale. They explain how we're meeting the state criteria, those Oregon administrative rules we've talked a lot about, and also the local government criteria for urban reserves. So it's the legal rationale. Number 3, the appendices are sort of, they're the appendices to the findings, and they provide additional background information explaining our analysis, sort of providing those breadcrumbs, but things that aren't specifically detailed out in the state rules, like the land need, the land supply model, the technical analysis, the suitability analysis, the details of that, and other items that provide backup to our analysis. So that's really the stuff, that's the meat of the technical analysis. That's the piece that, like I said, that you've been involved with. We also have to amend our code, or the county code, and a variety of plans to include urban reserves and to include the proposed area, the maps, and some regulations that the county is responsible for, or showing how they meet the letter of the law without imposing additional regulations. So we've been talking with the Lane County Planning Commission about that at a high level from the beginning, but we have to go into the Eugene Comprehensive Plan, the Metro Plan, the Public Facilities and Services Plan, which is a refinement plan to the Metro Plan, Lane County's Rural Comp Plan, and the Lane County Code. We have to make amendments to all of those plans because urban reserves are both inside the Metro Plan boundary and outside, which is the jurisdiction of the Rural Comprehensive Plan. So it's a lot of plan amendments. It's a lot of text and map edits there. And then the last one that Zoli, who's listening in, so I'm going to give her a shout out, is working really hard on is developing these intergovernmental agreements. And we've talked with you guys about these sort of at a high level. The service providers who provide specific services in urban reserves are required to have intergovernmental agreements with the city and the county talking about noting the fact that they're included in urban reserves. So there's 11 different agencies that we have to have these agreements signed with and then included in the adoption package. 7 of them are fire districts all around in different areas in the urban reserves. That acronym is JCWCD. It's the Junction City Water Control District. LTD, Willamette, because Willamette Park and Recreation District, who's in Springfield, has 3 properties inside the urban reserve area within their boundary. So we need to have an agreement with them. And then the county. So we're just beginning reaching out to these groups. We've mapped the boundaries and identified what needs to be in the IGAs, and we're just starting to reach out to those folks. So we're at different levels of completeness. We're not complete on any of these fronts, but we're at different levels on all of the sort of 5 components that go into the adoption package.
Really quick, Alexis, you had your hand up. I didn't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I took it down because I realized I could Google my question.
Oh, okay. Okay, well,
Well,
John's got
now-
his hand up now. So
Now I'm very curious.
is this a question Googling, John?
No, no, this is a question for a local planner. So in number 4, the plan code amendments, you mentioned that we're going to need to amend the Eugene Comprehensive Plan.
Mhm.
Where in the Eugene Comp Plan is this going to live? Because we haven't gotten to the chapter on housing yet and approved that.
Right.
So where are you planning on landing this in the Eugene Comp Plan? Or are you not going to include the housing part of it and just use it for industrial and employment lands like we did on the first round.
We're just going to go really high level. We're not going to include specifics on industrial or we're not going to talk about types of land. What we're planning on doing is it's funky because the urban reserves isn't within the jurisdiction of Eugene. It's outside of our urban growth boundary, obviously. But what we're thinking is we're going to put it in the urban growth boundary chapter. We may rename it, we may not. There's only one policy right now in that chapter. It is our UGB. So we're also going to include a background information explaining what the urban reserves are and how they will be the lands that are the first priority that the UGB would expand into, and include the boundary as an illustrative map. So it's not the official map in the Eugene Comp Plan because it's outside of the UGB. The officially adopted urban reserves boundary will be in the Metro Plan and the Rural Comprehensive Plan. We'll also reference, we think at this point, and anything can change, right? But right now our thinking is that we will reference the Board of Commissioners requested that we include a relook at urban reserves 10 years after the urban growth boundary is adopted. And we will include that as a policy in the Metro Plan and the Rural Comp Plan, and we will refer to those policies in the Eugene Comprehensive Plan so that people can look in any of those plans and be directed to where they need to go.
And then one more quick question on the Metro Plan amendment. Is that, I can't remember exactly when we amended the Metro Plan before, does Springfield has to sign on to that, or since it's just Eugene and Lane County jurisdictions, is it just the two of us that have to initiate and approve that Metro Plan amendment?
It's just the city and the county for the Metro Plan, but we're meeting with City of Springfield to talk about the Public Facilities and Services Plan, because that one is rife with references to the old urban reserves from the 90s, which included an area in Springfield also. So we're talking with them about whether or how they would like to participate in that, whether it's through an amendment or simply through a referral to them. And they can choose how they think it makes sense for them to participate. So that was a very timely question. I can't see people's hands. Tiffany, does anybody else have a hand up?
I'm monitoring it.
You're on it. Thank you.
But I'll just put it out. If anybody has questions, just, I can see this or I can see the thing on there. So.
Okay, I only have 15 minutes. We want to leave plenty of time for Thea. So yeah. I'm going to be really fast here. So This is how we think that the public hearing process is going to go now. We've penciled it all out and looked at the connections and the timing on all of this. And what we're assuming is that we're going to be meeting with the Lane County Planning Commission first to specifically talk about any regulatory policies that are within their jurisdiction. And then for the formal hearing process, we will have joint planning commission work session and public hearing, and then have separate deliberations and recommendations. And we don't know how many meetings that'll really take. This is what we've penciled in. So after we've received recommendations from the planning commissions, then we're thinking we will have a joint work session and a public hearing with the council and the Board of Commissioners like we did previously for direction. And then we will have separate deliberation and action. This process right here alone could take 6 to 9 months, depending on how many meetings it all truly takes. 6 months is sort of the most expedited version. Of course, at the end, there's a possibility of appeal, then DLCD acknowledgement. It's not sort of finalized. It's not finalized at adoption, it's finalized at DLCD acknowledgement. So we still have a lot of work to do, which we're doing. But we've got really good information, and we're in a good place for moving forward. But we are not yet at the point where I can tell you when we are going to have that first full package planning commission hearing ready to go. We're trying to meet with the county planning commission in May. I will tell you that. That's the first meeting that we are trying to schedule. So I will not take up any more time. I'm happy to come back and give updates at later meetings as we get farther along, if it makes sense. But if folks don't have any more questions, I will stop sharing.
I don't see any questions, so.
Okay.
All right.
I think I've put Phil to sleep. Oh, no, I haven't. Okay, good. Phew. All right, thank you.
All right. I think we're ready to move on to our next agenda item. So the growth monitoring, ladies. I'm not sure.
All right. Thanks. I'm going to share my screen.
Either or both, or okay.
Thank you, Tiffany, for being a great impromptu chair.
It's
Are
not
you
my
seeing-
first time. I think that's how I got no, I'm kidding.
Are you seeing the notes or the actual presentation?
It's the presenter view right now, so.
Yeah. There we
All
go.
right. Perfect. So tonight we're going to talk about a review of the preliminary development status and the existing development deduction. As a reminder, we have already gotten approval from you on most of the supply methodology. So all of the model inputs, the source data, we've gotten approval from you on how to go about assigning the development potential, how to quantify the existing development, and how to flag the lots that need manual review. So where are we now? The first step of the land supply model has been run. And that first step is taking in all of the information that's at the tax lot level itself. So the ownership and tax exemption status to determine committed versus non-committed, the assessor property class, the assessor improvement value, addresses on the lot, and any building footprints on the lot. So we've currently run that. And then after the review, the next steps are to incorporate information at the sub-tax lot level. So looking at any portions of a lot that may be protected fragments or committed fragments for easements. So we're not dealing with the protected yet. If you remember, this is how we did the urban reserves land supply model, but it is different from how the previous BLI was done, where it went ahead and ran all the information and then reviewed it at the very end. So what we're talking about now isn't set in stone, but it's just looking at the information that we have available to us at the tax lot level. And then later on, we'll get into the smaller level details. So in between the tax lot level and the sub-tax lot level, we have to review some lots manually. And we're reviewing lots for one of two reasons. Either they have conflicting information about their development status, or they're lots that are eligible to be partially vacant, and they've been flagged for review because we think that we might be overestimating the existing development on the lot. So here are the first chunk of lots that need to be reviewed. We ran all the information and came up with the preliminary development status. The land supply model assigned tax lots based upon the information available at the tax lot level. And then any tax lots that had conflicting information. So this was looking at the address, the property class description, the improvement value, and the building footprints. So if any one of those didn't match up with all the others, then we flagged them and assigned them a status of unknown, because those need to be further reviewed to figure out why there's conflicting information and which pieces of the information are correct. So you can see here, most of the lots fall into the developed category. Then committed, and third, we have a little under 3,000 lots that need some more review because they had conflicting information. So it sounds like a lot of lots, and it is a lot of lots, but really it's just under 5% of the total. So we're actually doing pretty well with the model and having it look through all the information and making sure that we're automating as much as possible. And then aside from the development status, we also need to look at the lots that need review of their existing development. So if you remember before, we know that the automated method may overestimate existing development if buildings are spread really far across the lot. If there are a lot of buildings and they're spread all across the lot. So a lot will be manually reviewed if the built area, which includes both building footprints and impervious surfaces, makes up 20% or less of the area that we calculated for the existing development, and that estimated existing development is greater than the existing development standard deduction, because we always round up to that standard deduction. So if it's less, we're not concerned with overestimating it because we're going to round up to the standard deduction anyways. So using those criteria, there are 220 lots that require a manual review of the existing development.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yes.
What does that mean, manual review? Does that mean you actually, someone has to physically examine the site, or is this something like, what does that process look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're going to get into it a little bit more, but essentially it doesn't require a field visit. It requires digging into the information.
Okay.
So at the end of this presentation, you guys are going to do some manual review.
Yes. We're all going to get to see what it involves.
I have Alexis with a question as well.
Yeah, just point of clarification. So I'm reading this as lot coverage, and like I know that there's a variety of lot coverage requirements in different zones across the city, but in the second component of this criteria, the estimated existing development is greater than existing development standard deduction. Is that just the average like lot coverage throughout the city?
So it's actually for relatively flat lots where the predominant slope is 0 to 5%, it's 0.33 acres. And for slope lots above 5%, it's half an acre. And that comes from, Heather, if you want to jump in and explain the whole process, but it comes from the previous buildable lands inventory and was vetted through, I'll let Heather speak to that more.
Yeah, so in the previous land inventory where we looked at every lot that initially came up as developed to see if it had partially vacant capacity. We at the same time looked at those lots to see how much on average existing development was showing up on those lots, so that we didn't have to actually trace out the existing development on each of those lots. We took a sample and we said, okay, it seems like most of the time we're seeing about half an acre up in the hills because of slopes. You know, you just don't have structures as close together. And then in the flatter areas, we're seeing more around a third of an acre of existing development. So that's the standard deduction that we applied for residential, unless the existing development was greater than either of those two. You know, so there was like multifamily development where it was clearly greater than, you know, a third of an acre, but it was also clearly partially vacant. So we use the standard deduction unless it was more, the existing development was more, and then we actually deducted the actual amount of existing development. What Thea is doing is trying to automate some of that for us. So it reduces the number of sites that we need to manually go through and review the existing development for.
Ed, you had a question, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Out of that 220 lots that need to be manually reviewed, would an estate on an acreage be included in that?
Sorry, Ed, could you repeat that last part of your question?
Would a big home and estate on a large acreage be included in that type of manual review?
So it really depends if the home, how much of the home makes up what we said was. So if you remember, what we did was we took the home and any impervious surfaces that were in the layer we were using, and we went out 15 feet around them, and then we made sure that we drew a rectangle around those to make sure it contained all of the building areas and that 15-foot buffer. And then we said, okay, that is the estimated existing development for the lot. So here we're saying anytime where the buildings make up less than 20% of that rectangle area needs to be reviewed. So it doesn't actually have to do with the lot size. It has to do with the ratio of the built area to what we're estimating is the existing development on the lot. I don't know if that helped clarify or.
I guess I'm just curious how that's going to change the original BLI.
So we looked at quite a few examples last time and identified that in most cases it's fairly close to what we used last time. So I don't think you'll see any significant differences with that because everything was so closely reviewed last time. We can take a look at that again later on. Once we have all those results, we can make them available to you, and you all can take a look through and identify any areas that you think we need to revisit.
I think you just answered my question. Thank you.
And I just, if I could, I know that John has his hands up, but if I could just add on to that, we are always trying to use, while still being consistent with the last method that we had, we are trying to incorporate new data sources where they are better. So last time we didn't have a layer in GIS that was a building footprint layer. And so that's why we had to go manually go through most of the partially vacant lots and draw where the existing development is. And so by using a building footprint layer and doing the buffer off of it, like Thea was talking about, that saves us some time in that area. And like what Thea was saying, what's nice is that we found that, hey, we did a good job last time and we're pretty consistent. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, John.
I think I know the answer to this, but I still want to raise the issue. you know, one of the things that we're looking at with House Bill 2001 is, and it kind of goes to the same thing, is, you know, if you've got a lot and it's got room for another building on it, let's put another building on it. That's what 2001 is telling us to do. In this instance, what we're looking at is, if we've got a house on a large lot, there's room for more development. And the thing that we're running, that I think we're running into, and I think we will here as well, is that there's CC&Rs out there. And I know that there's no tracking by the city of the CC&Rs that are in the city. However, and we've run into this on 2001. But however, I think if we're doing manual reviews, we can look and say, okay, this is no, don't shake your head until I finish my statement here, Heather. If there's people that we could reach out to, so let's say we're looking in the South Hills and we've got a bunch of large houses on 4 acres, right? And we say, okay, a lot of these have areas that could be put as partially developed and go into our BLI. But we reach out to the realtors of our community and say, does this area have CC&Rs? And if they could tell us that, we could pull them out. I'm just saying that this is an area that we may be counting lands that cannot be built because of CC&Rs. And I know that there's not a record at the city of the CC&Rs, but we're looking at things, manual reviews on some of these things. And if a phone call could go out and say, hey, this whole neighborhood has CC&Rs, and there's, of those 220 lots, 20 of them are in this one neighborhood, it might be worth us looking at.
Heather, you want to answer that? And you know, guys, I want to just chime in really quick, and as your chair, remind you that the chat is part of the off limits because of the public record whole thing, right? So I just want to really quickly acknowledge that there was a question in the chat about what CC&Rs was, which is codes, covenants, and restrictions. And if somebody wants to provide more clarification, I just want to put that on the record there, since that isn't going to be able to be viewable. So Heather had her hand up, and then Phil, I'll go to you.
Thanks. Yeah, so actually that was going to be part of my response. Sorry, John, I can't help but nod and shake my head and smile. I'm an open book, you guys, you know that by now. Codes, covenants, and restrictions are private agreements, is one of the reasons the city does not maintain a record of them. They are private agreements between property owners. Usually there's a homeowners association, and the properties within that area agree to these private codes, covenants, and restrictions. And so because they are private, it also means that they can be changed at any time. That's different than the zoning code and zoning requirements, which obviously have to go through policymakers, and it's more of a legal action in the public realm. So we can't really count on codes, covenants, and restrictions to limit development or not. They certainly do, because people sign into those agreements, but we can't enforce them. We don't enforce them. And so you're right, we have stayed away from those. When we talk about doing manual review, our goal here, I shouldn't say our goal, one of our goals, we need to be up here to some degree, right? I mean, there is a balance with the amount of review that we're going to do. So the manual review that we are doing is already a lot. And so there's kind of 2 reasons that I hesitate to go any further into codes, covenants, and restrictions. The third one, so there are private agreements that we don't enforce. Time. And then the third one is that, just as a reminder of what we're doing right now with rerunning the BLI, this is really to kind of check in on the BLI that we had before. So this is what I call the monitoring status BLI. We're not completely revamping the BLI. When we get direction from council to redo our, to relook at our urban growth boundary, we will then look at doing a new BLI with new methods if we need to, and we can talk about CCNRs then. I'd hate to do that right now. Yeah, thanks. I just feel like our efforts are better in another place, and we have another opportunity to look at that when we'll be looking at all of our methods again.
Phil, did you have a question? And then Lisa had her.
Maybe just following up on that. I mean, I'm not asking the city to enforce CCNRs, and traditionally you haven't, and you're loath to do it for all the good reasons that you mentioned. But if we're going through this kind of painstaking work, wouldn't the city want to know where they are and where they apply? So, I mean, as you come across them, you've got this colossal database. Isn't it just information that you'd want to know for future reference? Because we know that there are times where the city, whether you want to or not, sort of gets dragged into things that might be view related or so on, that kind of have some bearing upon maybe some sort of a planning decision that you either made or would make in the future. So I'm just kind of wondering, wouldn't you want to compile that data?
So it sounds easy. Can't we just, if we come across the CCNRs, can't we just use those? So we don't just come across them. They're actually, we have to go to the assessor's office to look them up.
Okay, well, I'm not asking you to use them in any way. I'm just asking, as you may discover that there are CCNRs in a given area that you're doing analysis in, is there some sort of a footnote that you put on your files or records to note that?
No, because we don't use those in our decision making. I mean, I think people have even applied for a land division, and neighbors have brought forward CCNRs, and I don't want to kind of get lost on this particular topic. We have a lot to cover. So it sounds like to me is that you guys would like to hear a little bit more about how we deal with CCNRs. I think there's case law around them where people have applied for land divisions. CCNRs say you can't do it. We don't look at CCNRs, so the city approves the land division, and it's really a private issue. So I mean, I think just from that basic standpoint that we don't even consider them in land use applications, then I'm not sure how we would consider them here. But I can definitely research it a little bit more and come back to you with this topic.
Okay, I've got Lisa. Alexis, you took your hand down. Are you good?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, to add to Heather's case.
Okay.
We've looked into this, and CCNRs are also complicated by, it takes someone to enforce them, and many of them are very stale.
Yeah. Lisa?
Thank you, Tiffany. And I might be asking this question at the wrong time, so Heather, it's coming up, let me know. I was just trying to think out about how this looks on the ground. So, you know, if you drive up Friendly or Crest or areas like that in the South Hills, it's easy to see homes that might fit the description or a developable lot. And I'm just wondering then, if it's identified as such, what is the communication then with that landowner? What does the city do, and what are the options for that landowner?
This is, you know, really supposed to be a review of your inventory of buildable or underdeveloped land in the city to understand what your potential is for accommodating your population over the next 20 years. And again, right now we're doing kind of a status check-in, so we're not doing the full-blown UGB analysis like we did in like we adopted in 2017. We're just kind of rerunning the buildable lands inventory as a status check. So there really isn't any communication that we do with individual property owners to let them know that we've identified their lot as vacant or partially vacant. There's additional, it would be kind of, I mean, they obviously know if it's vacant. If it's partially vacant, you know, there's still more work that they would need to do to understand what kind of development could go there, how much room do they have, what are the setbacks, is it dividable? I mean, all of those things, we're not getting into that level of detail. We're basically just looking to see if there is a set aside kind of vacant portion of a property where there is also development on the property. We have talked about taking the buildable lands inventory out to like neighborhood associations, home builders association, other groups that might be interested, just to remind people that just because you have a vacant lot next door or a big lot with a house on it doesn't mean that it's never going to develop, because I think, you know, to try to take away the element of surprise for neighbors. But that's the most that we've talked about, kind of pushing out information about where vacant and underdeveloped lots are.
Okay, I think we are ready to keep going.
All right. So now that we've identified the lots that need manual review, both of, or either of the development status or the existing development, the next step in the process is to identify commonalities. So this entire slide will pertain just to reviewing the development status of a property. But what we're trying to do is identify large groupings that we know some information about, to try and reduce the amount that we actually have to go and look through records for. So the first grouping that we identified were lots that have addresses created in 2020, but there's no building footprint, there's an undeveloped property class description, and there's no improvement value. So this would almost seem like a slam dunk case for saying it's undeveloped, but in reality, it's just that all of our systems take a little while to catch up with new development. So in this case, we're actually assigning these lots a status of develop, and we're giving them a standard note saying newly created address not yet captured in assessor database. And this is very similar to what we did in the last BLI, where we looked over all the lots, or not we, the group looked over all of the lots and looked at address points as sort of a proxy, we call that, for new development. So the address is the first thing to be created in a system when a new home is built. So this is a great way to identify new homes when they don't show up in any of our other systems yet. Next, we looked at another group where there's a developed property with a building footprint with significant improvement value, and with a developed property class description, but there was no address. And this usually happens when development spans more than one lot and the address only falls in one lot. So it could be a house that spans two lots, or it could be an industrial or commercial building that does, but there's not two addresses for that one structure. And so it has to fall in one of the two lots. However, with all of the other information, we feel confident that this is an actual developed lot. And so we are assigning a status of developed to these 288 lots, and including the standard review note to explain why. The third common grouping that we found was where there's no significant improvement value, but the lot contains development. It has a building footprint, it has an address, and it contains a developed property class description from the assessor. This usually happens in the case of manufactured homes, or in the case of where there are multiple owners for the lot, and all of the improvement value is assigned to a different tax account and doesn't show up in the one that we're using. So this 165 lots fell into this general grouping, and we assigned them the standardized note listed there to describe why we said they were developed. And lastly, there's the case where there's an undeveloped property class description, but the property has an address, it has a building footprint, and it has significant improvement value in the assessor database. And we'll actually take a look at an example of where this happens. We only identified 26 lots that this happened to, but here's one example outlined in blue. So you can see it's developed. There's definitely development there, over $5 million of it. So this is just north of the Beltline in between Highway 99 and Prairie Road. So if you look over on the left, you can see we overrode the development status, said it was developed, and then include the standardized note here to indicate why we made that decision. So if you have questions about any of those, we'll actually be going through the map and you can see individual cases of where we made those overrides a little bit later on. So I think that'll really help with bringing it home and allow you to visualize what it looks like when we're saying all of this.
Okay, real quick, I have Alexis and Sue in the queue, and I'll give them an opportunity to ask their questions, but it sounds like Thea said we've got, there may be questions being answered momentarily. So go ahead, Alexis.
I raised my hand for the prior point on point 3.
Okay.
If you want to go back to that, but I was just curious if manufactured homes, does that count all manufactured home parks?
So it actually happens in a variety of circumstances, but I think it usually happens in manufactured home parks just because they're the lots seem to be rather fluid. So a home might be taken away and then a new manufactured home might be placed on that foundation or the lot rather quickly. But the assessor happened to be there when it wasn't, or during the time where it wasn't placed. But it does happen in both the manufactured home parks as well as on individual lots.
Okay, thank you.
Sue? Sue, you're muted. I don't know if you, it's okay.
I forgot. I had to go eat and I forgot. So thinking ahead about growth management and growth monitoring, it seems like some of these idiosyncrasies maybe could be prevented in the future, so it wouldn't be so hard for staff to monitor these things. And it's one thing that we talked about a lot on infill compatibility standards task team and the technical resource group, how to standardize a lot of the information gathering that's happening within the city departments so that these processes would be easier. And I mean, I look at this and think about how many exceptions there are and wonder, this is a huge job. Exception of 255 lots or 288 lots or 165 lots, that's really a lot of staff work. So is there anything being done within the city departments to try to standardize the way that information is documented so that your jobs become easier during growth monitoring process?
That's a great question, and I would love for that to happen. Unfortunately, most of the data that we rely on right now with the assessor database is actually not within the jurisdiction of the city. So it's the Lane County Assessor Database. And we are in contact with them sometimes to communicate these instances where we see conflicting information and don't understand why. Sometimes they say that they will be updating it, but it's really up to the discretion of them. We battle a lot with instances where there may be adjacent properties that are owned by the same party, and for ease of the assessor, they will assign all of the improvement value to one of the lots and not the other. And so they're aware of that, and they are not willing to change that practice for some time. So I understand that it makes their job easier, but I can say that we are documenting everything that we come across, and we will hopefully be able to use that information in the future, and it will make things go a little more smoothly.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands, so
Okay.
we can keep going.
All right. So another large grouping of lots, actually almost, I think, a third of the lots that require a review of the development status are these that are classified by the assessor as miscellaneous unbuildable. And it's a legitimate property classification, and their definition is their properties that are defined as unique properties of unbuildable size, Department of Environmental Quality, easement, right-of-way, etc. So this actually covers quite a large swath of different scenarios. And we wanted to dig into it because we don't want to lose this valuable information the assessor collects, but we want to make sure that we're as consistent with how the BLI was done the last time, where we use land use data rather than the assessor data. So we looked into it, and there are about 873 non-vertical lots and 81 vertical lots. So just as a reminder, non-vertical lots are your standard lots. Vertical lots are ones that have different ownership on the same base. So it's lots where you have condos on multiple floors that are owned by different owners. That's the easiest example of it. So those are the lots that have a miscellaneous unbuildable property class description. And the majority of those lots, of the larger lots, you can see this graph shows the size of these lots that are classified as miscellaneous unbuildable. And the median value is 0.07 acres, which is about 3,050 square feet. So most of them are very small lots. But you can see there are some of these larger ones, all the way up to just over 13 acres in size. And so the ones that are highlighted in blue are actually larger ones that are owned by homeowners associations because they're common areas. And for those, we are categorizing them as developed during the manual review process. There are many requirements surrounding multifamily developments that actually require a certain amount of common area or open space. And so we are categorizing those as fully developed. So that amounts to 230 lots that are owned by a homeowners association. And classified as miscellaneous unbuildable. And that's the standard review note that we're assigning to them. And then the other properties that we're considering unbuildable, or that fall into that unbuildable category, are those that are non-vertical, they're not committed, and they're of an unbuildable size. So those are the lots that are less than 0.07 acres in size, or about 3,050 square feet. And we are assigning those a status of developed. It's 381 lots. And this is to mirror what we did in the last BLI, where we did not count capacity on lots that were below the minimum lot size. And we just wanted to try and make sure that we were being consistent with that, and that we're not counting lots on what is deemed unbuildable size, or capacity on what is deemed unbuildable size. Heather, did you want to add anything?
I do. Sorry, I probably lit up there. Yeah, so just to clarify, in the last BLI, it was, I think, LDR, low density residential plan designations, where we did not apply capacity to those really small lots. We did apply capacity to small lots around the city, but I think it was because we weren't using this miscellaneous unbuildable property class. We were using, like Thea was saying, we were using this land use layer that LCOG, Lane Council of Governments, was maintaining, that they're not maintaining anymore. We can't use it anymore. And so so we switched to using the property class description to kind of substitute what kind of land use is happening on the property. And they have found this one that's unbuildable, and was able to dig into it. I think if we had realized that this was an option last time, we would have used this, because Thea will show you some examples. It really knocks off a lot of small lots that appear to be, like stormwater easements and things like that. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that this would apply to all plan designations, not just LDR, which is what we did, which is when we used the small lot size last time.
Okay. And then, so those were the groupings that we used initially. And then we started digging into the manual review process and looking at the lots. So we identified all of those that were the unbuildable size and the common area lots owned by homeowners associations. And then did manual review on the others. And yet still there are about 183 remaining miscellaneous unbuildable lots that have not been reviewed yet. And so for those, what we want to get your input and feedback on is we are proposing assigning those 183 lots a development status override of developed, with a note stating classified as unbuildable and assessor database due to proportion of lot, an easement, or common area specified on a plat. And here's a couple examples, if you look on the right in that image, of what lots we're talking about. So these are 3 specific lots that fall into this grouping of 183. And we understand that the developed classification means that we won't be counting capacity on these lots, but we're not excluding them, saying that development won't occur in the future. We recognize that there may be some development occurring on these lots, but we don't want to count capacity on every single one of them and say it will happen on these lots. So We also feel comfortable with this miscellaneous unbuildable classification after digging into the manual review and seeing examples of where it happens, how often it happens. And we do recognize that the assessor's purpose is to collect property tax. And it is not within their best interest to apply this miscellaneous unbuildable classification to lots that are actually developable, because it results in less property tax collected. It's a lower property tax rate. So it's not within their best interest to do it unless they actually think that they are undevelopable or unbuildable for some reason. So we will go into a few more examples of what exactly this looks like once we get to the map. But here's another histogram of the size distribution of these remaining 183 lots. And it does total 90 acres. And you can see there are a couple of lots that are pretty large in size. And I can tell you right now that we'll take a look at some of those, but they are common area lots. They're just not owned by a homeowners association. So that's why we didn't capture them in our first round of review when we were saying, oh, it's owned by a homeowners association and it's classified as miscellaneous unbuildable. So that's a common area lot. So these are just ones that don't fit into the standard first set that we were looking at. And then once we looked at these common groupings and went ahead and assigned the override status that we talked about and then standardized notes, that actually took away about 1,300 lots. So we were able to say pretty confidently that those have been reviewed without having to dig into the individual details about the property. But to get into the rest of, or the remaining lots, we developed a web map for staff so that they could look into all of those details. They could zoom in, they could look at the imagery, they could look at the building footprints, the address, they could link back to the regional data system to find out more about the assessor information for that lot. And they could view it all in a pop-up. And then it actually allows for staff to edit the development status override field. And it allows them to measure the existing development area for lots that have been flagged for that and override it if necessary. And then it allows them to include notes on why an override was applied. And all of the edits are auto-tracked within the layer, both who made the edit and what time they made the edit. So it'll really help us with going back and piecing this all together. But it's also wonderful that it auto tracks so much of it. And when I talk about these standardized review notes, this is the list that we gave staff. And this is being added to every day as we find new cases that don't fit within these prescribed notes. But what we're attempting to do when we're taking a look and we're editing the lots within the map is to keep things as standard as possible so that we can report on the data later. We can go back and we can figure out how many fit into each one of these cases, just so that we can try and make things easier moving forward. So here's just a few scenarios that we've run into so far. We've done quite a few committed overrides for private streets that are also assigned that unbuildable status in the assessor database. And then just a variety of developed overrides where the assessor has assigned the improvement value to a neighboring lot, or there's a building that spans onto the lot but no address. And then some undeveloped overrides where we find that there's a recently demolished structure. So those are just some of the the examples we'll take a look at later. Where are we in the review process? We have reviewed about a little over 1,800 lots. So we're about 57% of the way through those lots that have been flagged for review. Here's a map, image of what the map looks like. The gray ones are ones that have been reviewed. The red, yellow, and orange ones are those that still need some type of review. So we are making good progress, but I will acknowledge that finding those groupings to begin with, the commonalities, knocked out the large swaths of ones that are really easy to do. And so now we get into the slog through looking at individual properties, and we have to do a bit more research with each one that we do. So we don't want to rush the process, but we also don't want to get too bogged down with the details. So if no one has questions, we'll actually switch over and take a look at the map and go through some of the scenarios.
I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, so if anybody ends up thinking of anything, just raise your hand.
All right, can you all see the map? Perfect. So here's what it looks like. You'll see the gray areas are ones that have been reviewed. So you'll see here's the pop-up, and this is one where we've said, yep, this is committed, and it's actually a private street that was assigned that miscellaneous unbuildable category by the assessor. So there's actually quite a bit of information in here. And you can see that I made that edit on March 15th. So here's another example of one of those miscellaneous unbuildable lots according to the assessor. And this one, if you actually look in closer, there's this lot here that's highlighted in blue, and then there's this lot right here. And both of these were flagged as the miscellaneous residential unbuildable. So we actually went and looked at the plat for this lot, and it turns out that these lots are both reserved for private stormwater purposes. So this is the case where we say, okay, well, we'll go ahead and say that they're developed because they're unlikely, or we don't want to be counting capacity on those. And then some of the lots where we're proposing, but we have not yet made the override to development, or sorry, to developed of the lots that were assigned miscellaneous unbuildable. So here's a good example. So most of them fall into the category of they're very, very tall and skinny. So it would be difficult if that was the only lot to fit development on it. So you can see this particular one is actually 0.14 acres. But some of them get quite large in size, like this one here is actually almost 1/3 of an acre in size. It's just that it spans such a wide area, and we feel confident that we should not be counting capacity on this. I actually went and spot checked a few of these against the land use layer just to see how we had been classifying it in the previous buildable lands inventory. This particular one was classified as in the land use layer as water, open water. So just, I guess it's some sort of drainage ditch. But it is unlikely to develop.
So that's an example, Thea. That's, I'm glad you brought that up. Just as a reminder, we haven't, when Thea was talking about this in the beginning, we're at the tax lot level. We haven't applied the protected and committed layers over this. And so some of these things, like the one that Thea was just showing, if we applied the committed or protected layers on top of them, that's probably they were committed or protected or developed in the last BLI. So like those private streets, we probably they were probably committed or developed in the last BLI. It's just that because the way that we're running the model this time, we haven't applied committed and protected layers yet. So that's something we're able to go back and kind of look how it ended up being classified last time.
That's a very good point. And here we'll actually take a look. This particular lot is one of those larger lots that we haven't overridden. It falls into the miscellaneous residential unbuildable status. If you look, it's that one lot that was hovering over 6 acres in the last grouping. And if you go and look this information up in RLID, which is the regional database that has information from the assessor, you can actually, I think it might be this one. So I'm not finding the right one, of course, but you can see it, it's this lot C, and if I find the right page, it will tell me that it's actually the common area, and it's a conservation zone, but they've said common conservation zone. So that is a case where we would not be wanting to count capacity.
And I would say that with the last BLI, we missed some of those. So I can't remember if this is one, but there are definitely some that this unbuildable classification is catching as not buildable, and it's not buildable on the plat. And I think we had identified it as vacant buildable in the last BLI.
Yes.
So it's good that we're picking up more information than we did last time.
Yeah, so in the last BLI, it was assigned undeveloped, and so capacity was calculated on that. So yeah, this will result in some differences in undeveloped to developed, even though no building has occurred there. But we definitely we recognize that there's a lot of value in this miscellaneous unbuildable category that the assessor has, and we want to use that as much as possible.
I've got a Phil with a question.
These funky, I've always wondered about the heritage of these funky circular lots. And there's some neighborhoods up there in Southwest Eugene that have used those. And there's a lot of common open space that sort of, I'm sure they've got CC&Rs that probably relate to not having fencing their circular lots. And it's really a well-designed kind of old area from the 70s, but how are y'all dealing with, is there any capacity? You're having to really drill down here into like what's been platted, and if there is any kind of just definitive declarations of making that that interstitial area open space. I'm sure that was the intent when they developed it, but are you able to glean that there's any capacity and undeveloped lots within there, or what?
So you're right, this is open space. And if you take a look, it's owned by the homeowners association. So we are counting that as developed. We're not saying there's any additional capacity there. Where we would be counting capacity is there doesn't look like it's happening here, but there are some of these where, like maybe this is a good example, where it's a duplex, or there's the house has actually fit into just one half of the circle. And so in those cases, if the other half of the circle is truly undeveloped, then we would count capacity on that remaining half. But that does bring up a good segment if we want to actually go ahead and walk through the process of what it looks like if we were to edit this one record right here.
And while you're doing that, Faye, I just want to make sure that you know, Phil, that in the last BLI, those that common area around the circle lots, we would not have counted capacity on. But the other one that Thea was showing, the Timberline Hills, where it was that big lot, it's not intuitive that that's the common lot without looking at the plat, whereas here it's much more clear. So that's why I say there were some of those common lots that we missed, but in this case, and most multifamily, we would have not counted capacity on the common area because it was more obvious.
Okay, real quick, I've got a few folks in the queue. I've got Lisa and then Sue, and we've got about 15 minutes. So I just want to quick time check. So Lisa, Sue, followed by John.
I was going to ask a question about another slide. So if folks have questions about this slide while we're on it, maybe they should go first.
Anybody have a question on this one?
John does.
John, okay. You're muted.
This just goes to the difference in that classification of that open space spot that Heather brought up. Are you going to make good footnotes on that so that we're not looking, we're trying to compare apples to apples, and the first apple we had it there and the second apple's got a bite taken out of it, and we don't want to have that bite attributed to development, right? We want to have that bite attributed to, oops, we got it wrong, there was a bite out of the first apple. Are you making those footnotes so that we don't say we've got this much less land in the BLI because we miscategorized this apple?
Take a first stab at that. So Faye and I have been talking about that a lot because we don't want to turn a blind eye to things like this, and this unbuildable property classification, because it clearly has a lot of value. But you're right, we also don't want to say this is the status of our inventory because of this amount of development. So the building permit database that we're working on, and that we hope to bring you results from sometime soon, is Elena, Zoli, and I have been going through all of the data that's been backfilled into it from our building permits, and figuring out how much buildable land each building permit is developing. And so we're going to have kind of two different reports. We're going to have, here's the amount of land that was used up by building permits. And then we're going to have, here's the status of our BLI. And so the amount of land that was used up by building permits on average compared to what we projected, we will be able to compare, and those will be pretty close to apples. The status of the buildable lands inventory, which Thea is working on, that's going to be kind of its own thing. So we're going to use both, but yeah, we won't be going like, they won't be able to compare to each other. And we probably won't ever, it will always be a little bit separate like that. Thea, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think that's a great summary.
Okay, I've got Lisa and then Sue.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that these areas that have the circular lots are all governed by CC&Rs anyway, right? I mean, so it seems like even if there were some development capacity there, we're restricted by the CC&Rs.
Lisa?
Thank you.
Yeah.
A couple slides back, we kind of skimmed over the area like right where 99 and Beltline come together. And I thought I saw some red polygons. So I was just checking if properties are zoned currently commercial, are they still, but they were empty, would they be counted in the buildable lands inventory?
Yeah, we're not looking at zoning, but the buildable lands inventory is based on the comprehensive plan designation. But we are looking at any vacant land and then identifying any partially vacant land in all plan designations except for parks and open space because it doesn't have housing or jobs capacity.
Okay, I was just curious because I think it went by quickly, but I think one of the plots there was a business that would use vacant land for stores, let's say like an auto repair, business where they're parking cars. I was just curious how you're dealing with it, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if it has just, like storage that's unimproved, like even a gravel area, we're not considering that an improvement. So that's where the assessor's improvement value comes into play and is really helpful because it helps us figure out, what is actually an improvement, because some of it's actually hard to even tell on the aerial photo. But yeah, that's a good point. It's a good clarification.
All right, I don't have any other questions. 10 minutes. 10 minutes on the clock. So.
All right. So we'll do a really quick example to show you what it's like to actually edit one of these. So here's the lot outlined in blue that we're talking about. We can see that the assessor has said it's residential vacant, and that based on the improvement value of 0, it's undeveloped according to the assessor as well. It does not have an address, but it does have a building footprint. And so this would be a case where we feel confident saying it's developed because there is a building there. It's just that the assessor assigned all of the improvement value and the address to the adjacent property. So that's where we would sorry, I'm copying and pasting something from my other screen. So I went into that standardized notes list and I found what applies. And so we're going to copy and paste that in. So I'm going to edit, select this one. And then I'm putting in our review note, which says development spans onto this lot, but it does not have an address, and the improvement value is assigned to the adjacent lot in the assessor database. And then for the development status override, I'm going to say developed. And I'm going to click update on the record. And hopefully it will work. It did. So now I can click on this lot again, and our edits show up here and time stamped and everything. So that's the general process that we go through. It won't change color until the next time you load the map. But
I wanted to also add on that, to your point, Sue, about standardizing our data. All of the work that Thea has put into having standardized notes and finding groups of lots that have conflicting data but are the same kind of group of lot, same kind of conflicting data, is really going to help us the next time we run the BLI. We're going to have these notes in here that are like, hey, we already looked at the plat on this one. It's a common lot. We don't need to look at this, even though the assessor data might still be coming back telling us that flagging this as a vacant lot, we will have this data already. So while it does seem like a lot of work right now, it is actually going to help us for the next time around. So we're just like slowly kind of making things, eventually things will get a little bit quicker.
And then I did want to go over one last example. So say that this was large enough to be partially vacant. You could actually measure the existing development, go around it on the map and measure it, and it would tell you what it is in acres. So that's how we're checking the existing development. We're doing it right in the map based upon the information that we have.
Alexis, you got a question? And then Ed.
More comment. I just want to say this is the gold standard of any community that I've seen around the state. Just with transparency around this type of process, it's amazing that you're detailing this. Thank you.
Ed, and then John.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree. This is amazing work and I'm very impressed. Wow.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And the other thing I was going to say is we should look into monetizing this and licensing it for other communities. And I'm serious, because the amount of work that has gone into it and the amount of staff time and those types of things, if we could package up this type of thing and say, hey, anybody who's doing anything to do with UGBs in the state of Oregon, we've got a tool that will make your life easy. And it's only $100,000 and a trip for Thea to Mazatlan.
John.
Well, thank you all. We really appreciate hearing those comments, and because, yeah, I mean, this is Thea's excellent work here. And it's just, I think it is going to be huge for us. So it's really great to hear that you guys agree with that as well. And we really appreciate your questions. They're very helpful. Even the discussion about CC&Rs, you know, all of that is really, really helpful. So thank you.
All right. Well, I think that staff, you can tell me, but I feel like that's probably a pretty good stopping point.
Yeah, I just
Okay,
want to
okay.
flag for folks that, as they mentioned, there is a lot more work to do. As we are able to kind of apply the 80-20 rule on reviewing those remaining lots, we will, because I think, you know, as we start finding commonalities where all of these lots are platted, you know, common lots, you know, we're not going to just keep going through all of the lots. So we're going to try to do a majority. But we really recognize that we want to get this to you because there's more work to do. So with that said, we are hoping to hold the April meeting, but if we're not at a good place, we don't want to give you another update. We want to actually bring you back some results. And so we may cancel the April meeting. So I just want to flag that.
Okay. So I'm seeing on the agenda, that meeting would have been April 15th. And you'll know at some point. And then we've got May 10th and June 17th is what I've got. So, okay. Well, I guess keep us posted on April. Any other questions or closing remarks or remonstrances or anything else, Ed?
I want to thank the ladies for co-chairing the event. You did a great job tonight.
Excellent job,
you.
Tiffany.
Thank you. My dog's been climbing on me, so I apologize. Like he's very distracted. I don't know why the rest of my family can't watch the dog while I'm in meetings, but anyhow.
You finished 2 minutes early, so it's like
I
success.
know. I'm on a good start, right?
More than
Well,
Good work by staff, really.
yes.
Outstanding.
Great job, you guys. Yeah, it really is pretty
Thanks again.
fantastic. So, all right. Well, she'll see you all soon. Maybe April, maybe not, but
Hey,
everybody
Thea, do we have access to that map and can go in and play it in it or no?
change all the things.
Not change it, but
You have to have Esri software, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, you do not have access to it because there's quite a bit of sensitive owner information in there.
okay.
You'll
Thanks.
just have to stick to Google Maps, John. So,
Okay.
okay, everybody.
Just real quick, we are trying to figure out how we can make something available to you. We're not sure exactly what that's going to look like yet, but there's a lot of value in you being able to poke around in something. So we're still trying to work that out.
Okay. Well, have a good night, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
See you
Good night.
soon.